A bunch of comments have asked me, more or less nicely, to take a look at gaming-focused distributions. And since Tuxedo just sent me their small form factor gaming PC, I thought this was the opportunity to turn two sticks with one thumb. Hey, I'm not killing two birds, so I had to tweak that metaphor, okay? So I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to look at a cool PC to use for a Linux gaming console, or just for gaming without using 3 cubic meters worth of space, but also, and more importantly, it was the perfect opportunity to look at the gaming performance differences between a bunch of different distributions, 3 of them advertised as gaming distros and a more general purpose one. So we will look at the Tuxedo Atlas S. It's a small form factor PC that is perfect for a home gaming console or just to avoid occupying too much space, but we'll also look at whether a gaming distro is even worth it compared to any other distribution. And we'll also look at this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Ground News. You might have noticed it's getting increasingly hard to get access to solid news sources, or at least to know if there's a specific agenda or bias linked to a specific news source, and some publications even have financial ties to certain groups. To sift through all that, there's Ground News. Ground News doesn't write their own news articles, they aggregate them from more than 50,000 local, national, and international publications. Each source gets a bias rating calculated using 3 independent organizations, and they won't push stories based on your behavior, but on the amount of coverage each story gets. They even have a feature called Blind Spot, which gives you a list of stories that aren't being reported upon by either side of the political spectrum. The end result is that you get all the information available, which lets you make your informed decisions on every topic, and it lets you escape your echo chambers. For example, we have this story on OpenAI and their latest voice demo being way too close to Scarlett Johansson's voice in the movie Her. It has 162 news sources covering it, with only 21 sources leaning right on the US political spectrum and 41 sources covering the story leaning left. You can get started with Ground News for as little as 11 euros per year, and if you want to dive deeper into the ownership of each publication and personalize your feeds more, they have plans with more features to get the full picture. So click the link in the description or scan the QR code appearing on screen right now to get 40% off full unlimited access this month. Okay, so let us start with what we will be using as our test bench here, the Tuxedo Atlas S. This is a very small form factor PC. It's mini ITX. It's 35 centimeters in length, 15 centimeters in width, and 21 centimeters tall. And it uses a nice looking case with wooden accents at the bottom, with 3 potential finishes, a jade green, a silver, and a matte black, which is the one they sent me. It comes with Intel 13th or 14th gen CPUs, up to an i9-14900. It can accommodate 2 M.2 SSDs, plus 2 SATA 3 drives, up to 24 terabytes in total. It can come with or without dedicated graphics, which can go up to a Radeon RX 7700 XT or an Nvidia RTX 4070. It can also get up to 96 gigs of DDR5 RAM, and it obviously has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and it comes with Linux pre-installed, Tuxedo OS being the default. So the model Tuxedo sent me has an i7-13700, 1TB of PCIe 3 SSD, 32 gigs of RAM, and the RX 7700 XT with 12 gigs of VRAM. It's sort of a middle-of-the-road build, definitely not entry-level, but you could spec it out a lot higher than this one, so it's a nice test bench. Now looking at the case, it is open on all sides, kinda required to make sure it has enough airflow in such a small box. You get a USB-A 3.0 port in the front and a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 port as well, plus the power button, all slotted in the wood panel, and it looks really good. At the back you have 4 USB-A 3.2 Gen 1 ports, 2 USB-A 2.0 ports, plus 1 Type-C 3.2 Gen 2 port. You have connectors for the antennae, a display port, and an HDMI port, plus a 2.5 gig Ethernet jack, and all the audio in and out you need, plus of course all the ports from your GPU. Here it is 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. You can easily open the top part of the case by just pulling on this little tab here. It gives you access to the on-off switch for the power supply. Here it is a Corsair SF750. And you can remove and unplug anything you want. It's a desktop. It is a small form factor PC, so the point isn't necessarily to have the absolute best performance for all the components you put inside. It's to have really solid performance, but also to avoid taking up too much space. What's certain is that you won't want to jam this thing between two other devices or to just glue it to a wall or a part of furniture, because obviously then the airflow is going to be a problem. Now this desktop looks good, and in its black form factor it will definitely not look out of place next to a gaming console or in your TV cabinet. It should also fit in about any piece of furniture you might rest your TV on. Tuxedo ships it with Tuxedo OS, which is a very nice distro that I use to run this channel on my own laptop, but this PC just has standard components, so obviously you can install whatever you would like, which is exactly what we will do in this video. Also, this video is not sponsored by Tuxedo. You already saw the sponsor of this video, and it's not Tuxedo. They sent me this device to review it, and they are regular sponsors of the channel, but I do have to send that device back once I'm done with it. And also, they never sponsor any hardware reviews that I do, whether they're from competitors, obviously, or from themselves. So today we'll take a look at Bazzite, Nobara, Chimera OS, HoloISO, and Tuxedo OS, and compare the performance for 3 games in all of them to see if a gaming distro is even worth it today. So first, Bazzite. It is a weird one. It's based on Fedora Atomic, so it's an immutable distro, and it's built using Universal Blue, which is a build system that lets you create tailored distro images for plenty of purposes. If that sounds weird and complex, just know that Bazzite is an immutable distro like SteamOS that includes everything you need for gaming straight from the ISO. You can pick the type of system you want before downloading. I went with a desktop PC image with KDE as the desktop, 4 AMD GPUs, and since I wanted a gaming console, I picked the Steam gaming mode by default, so it will boot into the new big picture Steam interface. You can of course get images with Nvidia drivers or for specific handhelds or laptops with all the customizations you need for full and perfect hardware support already applied. Installing Bazzite is just as easy as installing Fedora, meaning it uses the same atrocious Anaconda installer. It's not intuitive at all, but it works and the installation is quick. After rebooting, I could configure a bunch of things like installing Decky Loader by default, MU-Deck, and I had a bunch of other options available. And after logging into Steam, I had a return to gaming mode shortcut on the desktop, which dropped me into the usual new big picture mode, and the first run experience for SteamOS, which for some reason had to install things that took about 20 minutes, and it gave me a low battery warning even though I use a desktop. Now once everything was done, I connected a wireless Xbox controller immediately through Bluetooth, which was recognized and worked instantly. After that, I grabbed all the games I will be using for benchmarks, namely Horizon Zero Dawn, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Warhammer Total War 3 with 2 of its benchmarks. And I copied all of those to the internal disk of the Atlas, and I got started with the benchmarks. I ran all of these at the native resolution of my ultra-wide monitors, so 3440 by 1440p. Horizon is run using the latest version of Proton from Valve, the rest is just native Linux games. Everything was ran at their max settings, at the native resolution, without any resolution scaling, or FSR or anything like that, and everything ran under Wayland on all distros with all the latest updates applied. All these settings will be the same for every distro I test here. So for Horizon Zero Dawn, running the benchmark gave me an average of 80 FPS at these maxed out settings. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I got 105 FPS on average in the benchmark. And for Total War Warhammer 3 on the Battle benchmark, it reached 56.4 FPS and 52.5 on the Campaign benchmark. And it is very solid performance all around for all these titles. Now, Total War Warhammer 3 has never been really well optimized, whether it's on Windows or on Linux, and on any device I ever ran on Linux, I never managed to hit 60 FPS reliably with max settings. It just doesn't want to do it. It uses way too many resources. Now, in terms of noise, the Atlas S will be noisier than your average gaming console. It's a PC, it's going to blow a lot more air and you're gonna hear it. But it's not super noisy to the point that it will distract you from your gaming experience. So that's it for the results for Bazzite, but if you want me to dive deeper into this distro as a whole, because it can be difficult to understand, let me know and I will definitely take a look. The comment section is here for you to request this kind of stuff. Now next is Nobara. This one is not immutable, it is Fedora, and a lot of kernel patches, some add-ons, drivers and tools focus specifically on gaming and on improving performance. Nobara is made by the developer of GE Proton, and it's what I currently use on my own Linux gaming PC. It also has its own updater tool that will update all the components Nobara adds on top of the base Fedora. And importantly, it is not an official Fedora spin. It is a custom distro built on top of Fedora, much like Mint is a custom version of Ubuntu, for example. So, after pairing my gaming controller and copying all the games to the internal storage, I ran the benchmarks. Here are the results. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I got 106 FPS on average. In Total War Warhammer 3's battle benchmark, I got 57 FPS on average and 54.7 for the campaign benchmark. And in Horizon Zero Dawn, Nobara got 80 FPS on average. So very similar results here between Bazzite and Nobara. They basically have the exact same performance. Whether you want to go with Bazzite or Nobara will be your choice between an immutable distro and a more traditional distribution instead. I also gave a shot to HoloISO in its new immutable form. And that shot was extremely short-lived, because it never managed to give me a bootable system no matter what I tried. I could boot it from the USB key, launch the installer, install things, but after a reboot, it just got stuck on a black screen. I could not do anything. Trying to change UEFI settings or disabling CSM didn't work either. This distro was just unbootable, and that's the exact same experience I had on my Tuxedo Cube, which is my current gaming PC. I ended up going with Nobara instead of HoloISO because it just would never boot up. So no results on this one. So I moved on to Chimera OS. This is an Arch-based distribution. It's an atomic distro, so it's immutable, and it includes a bunch of emulation tools as well as optimizations for gaming. It defaults to GNOME as its desktop compared to KDE for the other distros I tested. The installer is extremely Spartan and will require an internet connection to download the latest image available. So don't expect the usual user-friendly installer here. It is not difficult, but it looks atrocious, although it is very fast. The first setup is basically just a setup from SteamOS, so it's a pretty decent console-like experience right out of the box. Quitting to desktop opens an extremely bare-bones GNOME, which is from where I installed and ran all the 3 games. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I got 102 FPS on average in the benchmark, similar to the other distros I tested. In Total War Warhammer 3's battle benchmark, I got 55 FPS on average and 51 for the campaign benchmark, a little lower than usual. And in Horizon Zero Dawn, Chimera OS got 73 FPS, strangely lower than other distributions. So Chimera OS gave me slightly lower results than other distributions I tested. I reran the Horizon Zero Dawn benchmark multiple times and it always ended up on the exact same FPS number, meaning that maybe something with GNOME and Proton doesn't work as well, because the native Linux games that I ran alongside it, Total War Warhammer 3 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, they got pretty much the same performance as with other distributions. So maybe there's something with GNOME and Proton that doesn't work quite right, I'm not sure. So, just for fun, I also decided to run all of these games on the pre-installed Tuxedo OS on this computer to see if these gaming distros offer improved performance compared to a normal system. And here are the results. In Horizon Zero Dawn at the max resolution and max settings without any upscaling, the Atlas S with Tuxedo OS got 81 FPS on average, similar to other distros. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, at the max settings and resolution, it reached 106 FPS on average. Again, similar to other distros. and in Total War Warhammer 3's battle benchmark, at the max settings and resolution, I got 57 FPS on average, and in the campaign benchmark it reached 54.9. So if I can judge from this limited testing set of 3 games and 4 benchmarks, it doesn't really look like gaming distros will do anything for your performance. They will give you better tools that are pre-installed specifically for gaming, stuff that you don't have to go fetch in your package manager, but if you compare it with a regular Ubuntu-based distro like Tuxedo OS, it's just Ubuntu LTS with a newer kernel and drivers, and that's about it. When you compare the two, you end up having the exact same results, and between gaming distros, they all perform really similarly, except maybe GNOME seems to not perform as well as KDE right now, at least using Wayland. Maybe on X11 the results are different, but at least if you run Wayland, don't be bothered too much by which distro you should run for gaming. As long as you use something with recent kernels and recent drivers, you should just have the same experience as everyone else. And as per the Atlas S, if you're looking for a really small form factor PC, these can be really annoying to put together yourself because it's super fiddly to manage to plug everything in this small enclosure. So if you would rather just buy one and turn it into a console, the Atlas S looks good, will not make your living room into a nightmare if you slot it under your TV. It doesn't make too much noise, and the performance is actually pretty good for such a small PC with very little airflow. So check it out, I left a link to it in the description. Okay, so this will conclude this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, comment, turn on notifications. If you have used other gaming distros, if you would like me to take a look at specific gaming distros with more tests, let me know in the comments as well. And in the meantime, I guess you will see me in the next one. Bye!